everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, my name is Louisa. I am a third year student at Cambridge. This video is going to be all about what it's like to be a class act student at Cambridge. I've got my friend Joseph here, he's going to introduce himself in a minute. Without further ado, let's get going with the video. Before we do start, just a quick disclaimer, anything we talk about in this video is kind of limited to our own experiences at Cambridge and Joseph's experiences. So please don't take this as by exactly how it will be if you come here and if you apply. Everyone's experience differs, but this is just so you have a rough idea of what it might be like and a rough guide as to how it is. Joseph, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Joseph. As Louisa already introduced, I'm a friend of hers, and I'm a third year natural scientist at Trinity Hall. So I study history and philosophy of science like Louisa does. And I am the class act co-officer for Trinity Hall as well.
So we will explain a bit about what all of that kind of means, what co-class act officer is as well. So first question then, I'm going to be interviewing Joseph with a few different questions. The first one is, what does it mean to be class act?
So to be somebody who is class act identifying, you typically are somebody who has been a young carer. You're somebody who has been your care experienced in the sense of you've been in care, or you can be estranged as well. So that means you're you just don't have any family really or parents to be with and you can go home to. And you're also from a state academy, so a comprehensive school, and you're typically working class. You're from a very low income family where your family can't financially support you either. So it's emotional and it's financial. Okay.
What about young carer as well?
So young carer, of course, is always one of the main ones as well.
Okay. And it's particularly state comprehensive because am I right in thinking it's around 93% of students in the UK are at state school? That includes grammar school, but state comprehensive in particular as well is a large part of that. So
it's currently, as far as I know, 93%, and 7% is private schools. However, when you look at university admissions for different universities, of course, it's very rarely fully in line.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. So that's what it means to be class act, and as you can see there's a range of different things there, and state comprehensive is probably the one that most people watching this channel might fall into. So it's useful to know a bit more about being class act at uni and applying to uni. So my next question for you, Joseph, is what was your experience of being a class act student whilst you were applying to university or at sixth form, and what advice would you give to those who are applying who are class act students?
I would say the thing that was most interesting for me was for quite a bit of sixth form, I didn't really consider myself very class act identifying, such because of course I didn't know that terminology until I came to university, until I came to Trinity Hall. I went to a state academy for my GCSEs. By the grace of something, I did really, really well. And with the encouragement of one particular member of staff, they said, you need to go to this place because you can really access, the academic stuff that you need and deserve. So I moved schools from a very special measures school to one that was outstanding, and it was one of the best in the region. So I was, as I said, I prefaced it with that because I was very fortunate in sixth form. Being at that school though, it did start to highlight some of the things that I would also notice later. You start to notice how better off a lot of people are financially. So I come from a home where I had to be quite a bit of a young carer for my mum. And I came from a family who were on benefits, and I'd always been on free school meals. And for me, therefore, it was very strange once I started to notice those differences between my peers at school, because though I'm very fortunate in the fact that I was doing very academically well, people that were similar to me, they were academically, they were also from a very different background to me, and I found that very jarring. I'd never intended applying to a top Russell Group university. At the end of year 12, that our school said to us, so they were we need to have a meeting with some of you, and they said, we think you should apply to Oxbridge. You guys clearly are capable enough, and some of you may already want to do it. And for me, I'd never considered Oxbridge in my life. For me, going to university itself was sort of a luxury. Oxbridge was something really far beyond anything that I'd ever considered. And so it was in some ways, it was really nice and opening and so warm to think, wow, that's an opportunity I can have.
So it was sort of at this point when you were applying, it was the realisation that actually this is on offer to you, and it wasn't something that as a class act student that you'd previously really considered.
Yes, exactly. So I'd never considered it. When it actually came to doing the application with UCAS, it was in some ways just really strange to me when you would chat to people at my school, and they would talk about where they were thinking of applying, and a lot of them did want to apply to Oxbridge. Some like very clearly didn't, even though they were told by the school that they thought that they had a shot. For me, it's like, as a first generation student as well, of course I'm going to apply, but it was much more on a whim. So
how about the actual UCAS application thing? Because that's something that everyone will do regardless of what university they're applying to. So when you fill in the UCAS application form, what is it on there that you can highlight?
So when I applied, of course, I applied in, it was like 2019 to 2020. So I applied in October 2019, that's when my application got submitted. And as far as I've been made aware, it had changed quite a bit. And it's going to change soon. So of course, I had to fill in a personal statement, that's quite standard. And personal statements themselves can be a lot of stress, particularly when you hear that some people get them paid for. Of course, that is not what should be happening, but like,
it's a reality.
It's a reality, and as far as I know, because they're changing that, it'll become less relevant. I conclude that I just need to be honest. On it, like, you need to be as honest and as like sort of true to how you feel about what you're applying for, because you don't want to apply to university without really enjoying the thing that you're going to do, or without having good reason to do it. Because it's a lot of money, and it is an experience, but also you're making a financial commitment.
Especially also if it's not something that you've really considered until the point where you're at sixth form and maybe a teacher says, have you considered this? If it actually isn't what you want to do, you shouldn't just do it because someone says you have the potential to.
Exactly, and I will just say that as well, like there's alternatives as well for people, like, you know, there are things like degree apprenticeships and also just apprenticeships. You have your personal statement, you have your teacher's references, and teacher's references, they are like, as far as I'm aware, you can still ask for them. You can actually ask for them if you decide you want them, because it's something they can disclose about you. However, you don't immediately see them. It may have changed since I applied. That's something you can discuss with your teachers. You have your predicted grades, which sort of, they let you know roughly where it might be wise to apply to or where not to. You want to apply somewhere that will really fit you academically, and you don't want to be applying somewhere that won't fit you academically. If you're applying with something like ABB, which is like a fantastic set of grades, then you might not necessarily be able to apply somewhere that's requiring A-star AA. Place you really get to have a lot of input, other than when you're putting your details down about who you are, and of course there you can disclose, as far as I'm aware, if you're a care leaver. And which is really important if you are a care leaver, because do disclose that, because that's something they can take on. And you can also, as you go through, like, you know, you'll also disclose like what school you did your GCSEs at and stuff like that, and that sort of data will be something that informs universities.
It's contextual data, so any information about the school you went to will also inform them that will inform them if you're Class Act, and they can use that for contextualisation.
Universities consider poll data or polar data or something like that. They're sort of flags to say, this is somebody who might have had disadvantages in life, or they might have a reason to contextualise everything. As far as I'm aware, they're also going to introduce a young carer section where you can disclose if you are one. That's if you consider yourself one. That's something in itself that I think a lot of people don't. Some people don't consider themselves one. And so a lot of these Class Acts identifying, like, you know, groups, people might not necessarily believe they're entirely part of them. It's entirely understandable to feel like that, because you're sort of like, well, no, it's not that serious, or I'm like not struggling that much. But it's something that I think if you experience it for a while, it's not something that is like sort of glaringly obvious or something that is abundantly clear. For example, if you're a care leaver, you know that you're a care leaver. Whereas it can be harder when you get to things like being a young carer, unless of course you're exactly. Unless you're like getting paid by the government for it. I say getting paid, like getting carers allowance, you might not know. And UCAS, sadly, like, you know, with, at least when I applied, didn't have lots to be able to have that input. And it actually came to when I applied to Cambridge that there was a bit more that you could use in terms of that.
Okay, so let's come on to that then, because the SAQ is something that is to do with the Cambridge application. So can you tell me about the SAQ and how you use that as part of Class Act applications?
So in terms of the SAQ, you get to put like down additional things relating, I think, to your personal statements. It's essentially what Cambridge does to try and say, well, give us a bit more, because we understand that UCAS doesn't afford you a lot of space to really give what you feel or think, or, you know, what's specific to you. In part, that's because places like Oxbridge, I don't know if Oxford has a similar thing, but
I don't believe it does. I think it's just Cambridge. So the SAQ, just what it stands for quickly, is the Supplementary Application Questionnaire, and it's a few extra paragraphs if you want. You don't have to fill it in, but if you want to, you can. But yeah.
And it doesn't look badly on you if you don't fill it in.
Yeah, exactly.
But
I
equally,
didn't fill one in.
But equally, it can give more contextualization or detail if needs be. There was also the opportunity to submit like supplementary information, which was relating to if you have a very particularly difficult circumstance. You've got like, you know, you're doing all your A levels and you have a certain class act identification like group, like you identify with a certain group, and it's really impacting your time at like school and your A levels. That's something that they can be made aware of.
Yes.
And if they're made aware of it, then they can consider that in your application.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say like, you know, anyone should feel that it's going to look badly on them if they do or don't fill it in. It just means you can give the admissions team as much of a sort of full view of your entire situation, and it's always used in your benefits, never against you, whatever you choose to do.
And then the last thing is like to do with open days and accessing them as class act might be a bit difficult.
Yes, so something that I noticed as well for me, see when I applied to Cambridge, when I applied to Cambridge, I had not been to Cambridge. My first time in Cambridge was my interview day, which was very daunting, and I also applied to a few of the universities. I applied to Nottingham, Loughborough and York, and I'd only been to York on my interview day there as well. And at Nottingham, I went there for like an open day in year 10. I knew what it looked like, so it didn't really bother me. But I was just fortunate in the fact that that had been sorted for Nottingham, but I hadn't had that sort of, I was going to say, luxury with York or Cambridge. When you're class act identifying, you may, if, for example, if you're a young carer, you can't go to these open days at universities. Also, if, for example, you don't have the financial means a lot of the time to be able to afford that as well, because you have to buy train tickets, you might have to plan ahead, and if you're coming from further away, you might have to stay there. And that's a lot of financial commitment for a lot of people. I think for me, what I found was the best way around it was I use the websites a lot, and I also took advantage of what my school could offer me. And as I said, I was very fortunate in sixth form, in fact, I went to a really good school. But even when I was doing my GCSEs, you know, I remember they did do these open days at universities. They let you see the university and experience it a little bit. And, you know, like you want to take advantage of that. And of course, if you don't have that available to you, that's perfectly also understandable. They have things like prospectuses, they have, you know, these things online. They let you do virtual tours as well, I believe now. A lot of universities do online events, and they like discuss with us things about what it's like in the application process, and sort of they guide us a bit more, because some schools don't actually really know what it's like, because some people never apply, which is fair enough. Like take advantage of UCAS open days. Like there's something that are fantastic because you get to meet someone that might be a representative and you get loads of free stuff, so it's like really good. And something Cambridge did was they had someone come to my sixth form and talk about applying to Oxbridge. They pointed out there are certain degrees that, you know, some people aren't aware of either. And when you're like looking through degrees, particularly when you're a class act identifying person, I think if you've had financial issues or you've had family that comes from financial difficulties, you tend to look for very well-known subjects, or subjects that you believe will, like, you know, get you, you know, a very good sort of financial future, which is fair enough, because that's what a lot of people do want. You need the stability. And something that they reminded us of when they came to schools, they said these are also possible degree choices. You shouldn't necessarily go for a degree for the money. At Oxbridge, I think if you were really not passionate about it, you wouldn't. Once you got your interview, you might do your interview, but you might not really get in because of that. But equally, if it's something you're doing and you're sort of passionate about, but equally, you know, your passion lies elsewhere, it sort of does limit you in some ways. And I think it's much more important to do something you really love, because you realise, I think, that you can go very far, and you can find so many different routes into careers. Okay, so that was the first question about applying to uni and what it's like to be a class act student applying to uni. So thank you to Joseph for your answers. What I think we're going to do is film a second part with the other questions about what it's like to be a student at uni. So if you want to refer to that more specifically and look at all of that information, I'll have a separate video on my channel next week. So that's it for now, and we will be back next week. Right, I'm going to also pause that because then it'll make it easier for me to upload this. Oh! What on earth is that?
My bike, like chain. It
That
got caught in the
is
bike chain. I can't wash it out.
It'd be kind of cool if it was like all over. Bestie, you should have put some non-anionic surfactant, like something that saponifies on it, because it's oil.
Right, okay.